Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. The naturalist Sir David Attenborough has said climate change is humanity's greatest threat in thousands of years. He was speaking at the opening ceremony of the United Nations-sponsored climate talks in Poland. The meeting is the most critical on climate change since the 2015 Paris Agreement.
Right now, we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale. Our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. The United Nations provides a unique platform that can unite the whole world. And as the Paris Agreement proved, together we can make real change happen.
Rather than spending all their time working on how to increase ambitions to cut carbon, conference delegates are likely to focus on trying to finalize the technical rules of how the Paris Agreement will work. The naturalist is taking up the people's seat at the conference called COP24. He's supposed to act as a link between the public and the policymakers at the meeting.
In the last 2 weeks, the world's people have taken part in building this address, answering polls, sending video messages, and voicing their opinions. I am only here to represent the voice of the people, to deliver our collective thoughts, concerns, ideas, and suggestions. The world's people have spoken. Their message is clear. Time is running out.
Speaking at the opening ceremony, the UN Secretary-General said climate change was already a matter of life and death for many countries. He explained that the world is nowhere near where it needs to be on the transition to low-carbon economies. But the UN Secretary-General said the conference was an effort to right the ship, and he would convene a climate summit next year to discuss next steps. Meanwhile, the World Bank has announced $200 billion in funding over 5 years to support countries taking action against climate change. Local author Dawn French and her fictional character Peanut are talking climate change and the dangers that come with it. The former NEMO director, who also lends her services to Sedima, spoke to Hot 7 News on the topic after concerns were raised about the rising global temperatures.
Environmentalist Sir David Attenborough said at a climate change conference in Poland, quote, "Right now we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change," end quote. However, closer to home, local author Dawn French, who is also the former director of the National Emergency Management Authority, NEMO, says this has been painfully obvious for a long time. The evidence of climate change, she said, is everywhere.
Do you really need scientists to tell you that? It feels hot. And so to have the scientists confirm what we have been feeling may be a bit disturbing. I know from reports on climate change and the impacts on the flora and the fauna and the planet as a whole, there will be cause for concerns, particularly in the agriculture industry. We've seen what storms can do. I'm not sure we've quite seen what heat and drought can do yet. So we really have to be prepared. Are we going to shift to plants that are heat resistant, drought resistant? Do we have plants indigenous to St. Lucia that are already that way? Some research is going to be needed.
Doing her part to sensitize the public about the very real threats of climate change and global warming, French penned a number of books on the topic. The books are aimed at children and are featured in her Peanut series, which surrounds a fictitious 8-year-old girl of the same name.
It's a vehicle for sharing information with children. And so there are quite a few environmentally themed stories, some on solid waste management, some on climate change, some on the ozone layer. And I've done them in collaboration with the agencies responsible. So when I did Sargassum, I gave it to the fisheries department to scientifically check for me. When I did the ozone layer, the sustainable department did it for me. And when I did the solid waste, that authority. So it's always factually accurate because I want to impart the correct information because the children do absorb that information. So there have been a few titles that have dealt with the environment and plastics and renewable energy.
French said in the real world, especially in the part of the world that St. Lucia is situated, rising sea levels is one of our biggest threats.
When do we reach a tipping point? The scientists can tell you. It can impact the trade, how the sea circulates between North America, Europe, and back down to the Caribbean. That whole chain of the hot water going up to the north and the cold water coming down to give that balance. If that is tipped, then there's severe consequences. Hopefully, that's way down the line still. But obviously, as small island developing states, we've seen what's happened to sister islands in the Pacific. I was part of a team a few years ago where we had done projections for St. Lucia for sea level rise. And to show you how dramatic it can be, when the GIS expert put in the information from the United Nations Climate Change Committee, the seawater level was in the Massey Car Park. So the shape of St. Lucia was going to change. It was going to impact that mangrove, all that waterfront property. The road was underwater. It was in the parking lot, essentially. And so it's very dramatic and very real. If the seawater level starts to rise, we can see how high it is in the Castries Basin when it's just high tide.
French said she felt compelled to write the books as she felt that there were not enough books teaching children about the weighty topics of the world. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
Prime Minister Alan Shastney is attending the 18th special meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community on the CARICOM Single Market and Economy CSME. That's happening in Port of Spain, Trinidad from the 3rd to the 6th of December. The special meeting was agreed to at the July CARICOM session in Jamaica. It focuses on establishing an effective and meaningful CSME and looks at CSME as a platform for growth and development. Several areas for the implementation of CSME will be tackled, including expansion of categories of skilled community nationals, the principle of mutual recognition of companies, and effective settlement of disputes. The heads will also discuss how CSME can be supportive of member states' development goals and priorities and thereby make it more effective. In the Prime Minister's absence, Minister for Economic Development Guy Joseph will serve as acting Prime Minister. In other news, the shortage of local produce on the market is causing frustration for not only consumers but the vendors who depend on the sale of such produce to make a daily living. One Castries market vendor has asked the public to patronize the local stalls so she too can have a festive season. Nisha Charles reports.
When not enough food is produced or when crops are destroyed through weather conditions or infestation from pests, food shortages can occur. The agriculture sector has been taking a hit, not just with the damage to crops, but the influx of imported produce. With the festive season in full swing, consumers are looking to have their traditional foods on their plates. But with food shortages and high price demands from the suppliers, the vendors are feeling the punch. One Castries market vendor is lamenting the number of items that are either not on her stalls or have been replaced by what she calls inferior imports.
For the past years, I've noticed there are a shortage of ginger, yam, especially the white yam that we knew before, baja, and sorrel. Right now they have imported the red sorrel, not the red, but the purple sorrel, which we knew it was the red and white sorrel. But right now I've noticed the red sorrel and white have vanished away, and we have another one which was imported. We also have the ginger. They have been importing ginger. And many a times when you see things are rare on the market demand, things goes high. But due to certain time of the year, we find the hurricane season. When hurricane do pass, you find things have been destroyed. And there is a high market demand.
She argues that while consumers may be deterred by the steeper prices, is not entirely the fault of the vendor.
The prices goes up, and many a times people do say like the vendors trying to rob the people. That's not the case, because the producers are selling very expensive to us. Hence, we have to put it at a rate whereby we ourselves can make a profit. We cannot come here 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning just to buy the produce and give it back to the people. It cannot be so. That is our way of living. That is the way that we get a salary. And that is why, the main reason why you find we have to put the prices a little higher that we may get a profit.
The vendor is calling on consumers to support local so that she, along with other vendors, can have a festive season. For the Hot 7 News, Nisha Charles reporting.
Local manufacturers are speaking out following the recent opening of the Taiwan-St. Lucia Partnership Trade Show. While the trade show is being touted as a success, some believe that more can be done to promote local artisans and include a more permanent space for handmade goods to be displayed. Solange Alfred reports.
The recently held Taiwanese trade show has been touted as a success by many of the organizers. Reaching out to local artisans, Hot 7 News sought to find out if the same sentiments were expressed by those who participated. Manager of Poetry Kisses, Jennifer St. Louis, who creates wearable art, believes that the 2018 Taiwanese trade show offered local artisans a great opportunity to showcase their products. However, the new location at the Golden Palm Event Center was not ideal for patrons to adequately view the range of products on display.
That trade show really gave us the exposure that we needed, gave me the exposure that I needed. I've done a lot of marketing, and we just had a rebranding, a completely new relaunch. So that was basically the avenue that we used it for. So I had all of my marketing, the banners and everything, and it gave me the exposure. It brought out a lot of people who wouldn't ordinarily see the things that I produce or know me or know the business, came out and supported us and were introduced to Poetry Kisses. So I think that that exposure is needed, and it aided in that area. My only concern was this is my second year doing the trade show. So last year we had it at a bigger venue. The Johnson Center was a lot bigger. There was an open concept. Everything was flowing, the crowds especially. And because everybody, the previous years, that's where they were before. Now we are at a new venue this year. I think it hurt us just a little bit because not a lot of people were aware of where the new venue was. And because of the nature of the floor plan of it, it was segmented. It didn't have as open a concept as the Johnson Center.
Her solution? St. Louis has put a call out to the powers that be to look into creating or obtaining a space that will allow for the proper walkthrough and provide a location for homegrown, all-natural, locally made products in St. Lucia.
In future, maybe we do need, well, not maybe, we do need a concept similar to the Johnson Center, big open area where they could have events like those. The other area that they did consider, I think, in hearing was the Darren Sammy Stadium. But even then, it's outdoors. There's so many different variables to take in, the weather, the floor plan and wiring and electricals, everything. So it wasn't really conducive. So that was the next best thing. So I do think that we do need a facility to house these events, and not just an annual thing. I think we do need the exposure as young businesses, completely homegrown, made in St. Lucia, handmade things, whether it's jewelry or food. I do think we do need a home that sets us apart from the things that are mass-produced, imported as well. We do need somewhere that people could come to and see us and know that these things exist.
St. Louis states that with stiff competition from big retail outlets and established international brands, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises need a space to call their own, where the St. Lucian public will know that this location is one that enables the economic development of the entire nation.
From speaking to my colleagues, they produce food, they produce alcohols and certain things, and you ask them, okay, where can I find you? Are you in the supermarkets? Are you on the shelves? And the answers are always no. It's always a resounding no, or not yet, or there's too much red tape, or I'm waiting on this. They need all of these documentations, which is understandable. And sometimes they do have the documentation, but there's always something, something stopping them from being on the shelves at Massey, or go walking to Dax and seeing them on the shelves and ready to purchase. So you would have to track down these people and find them on social media. We have no, like I said earlier, there's no space to house all of these things. You go to the vendor's arcade and you walk in, and sad to say, there's a lot of things that are imported. Most of them are not locally made, not locally produced, nothing. They basically just have been printed, made in St. Lucia or from St. Lucia, but they're not. And so just like they have their house, we need to have a space as our own as well. I do believe that the powers that be need to work on that. That's something that they do need to produce.
According to St. Louis, the support received by local organizations in aiding small businesses has its limits. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Solange Alfred.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News. Stay with us.